Hello everyone and welcome to SkillCapped. I'm Notorious Dub, and recently we've been having a ton of huge changes come to Valorant, and it seems like in all levels of play everyone is limit testing and figuring the meta back out. So today I'm going to be going over the biggest meta changes that we're seeing from the Sage changes, Vandal buffs, Breach buffs, Killjoy nerfs, and breaking down all of the ways the meta has been changing over the past few days and what the meta is actually shifting towards so you can keep ahead of the curve in your respective elo. But before we get into that, do you find yourself struggling to win gunfights? Are you a bit lost on what you should be doing in game? Or maybe you find yourself stuck at your current rank? Well, don't worry, as our brand new hyper improvement system is specifically designed to solve these problems. At SkillCapped.com, you'll finally learn how to improve your aim, different techniques to win gunfights, and so much more. We have professional courses on every single agent, map, and mechanic in Valorant. This is also backed by top pros, players, and coaches to make sure you're getting the most up-to-date and accurate information possible. In fact, we're so confident that you'll improve using our system that we offer a rank improvement guarantee. Check it out yourself in the link below, simply put in what rank you're currently stuck at and find out what rank you're guaranteed by using our system. So, what are you waiting for? Unlock your true potential and get the rank you've always wanted at SkillCapped.com. Link is in the description below. Alright, so first off, let's take a look at the Vandal buffs and how that affects the numbers and statistics that are shifting the opinions of pros on that gun. So the Vandal buffs increase the base damage by 1 across the board, from 39 to 40 and 156 to 160 on the head, which has very little impact on the effectiveness of the weapon because it doesn't really change any of the bullets to kill threshold. But that 1 extra damage does increase your combat score by 1 every time you shoot someone, so technically it is a buff to the rank climbing ability with that weapon. But what really matters in terms of the Vandal buff is that the rate of fire was increased to 9.75 rounds per second from the original 9.25 rounds per second fire rate. Now that's only about a 5% buff to the fire rate, but that's actually a huge change when we break out our chart to see the time to kill statistics. With the Vandal being buffed, it actually brings the time to kill thresholds to favor the Vandal very heavily. Now we still see the Phantom win out in the time to kill differences at close ranges, with it being about 0.02 to 0.03 seconds faster across the board at ranges closer than 15 meters, no matter how much HP the enemy has. And that 0.02 to 0.03 difference may not seem like much, but it is significant. Even more significant though, is the damage thresholds between the Phantom and the Vandal now at 15 meters and further. Now at 125 HP, the Phantom is slightly faster than the Vandal between 15 to 30 meters, but with both characters having 150 HP, which is what most fights are going to consist of, from anywhere in the 15 to 50 meter range, which is where most fights are going to take place, the Vandal has almost a 0.06 second advantage on the Phantom. That's almost a 20% faster time to kill in most of the engagements that you're going to find yourself in. Now it used to be a bit more even across the board, where the Phantom had a heavy edge in the close range engagements and was slightly worse in the longer range engagements, which happen more often. Now though, the tables have completely flipped to where the Vandal is slightly worse in the close range engagements, but has a very heavy edge in the medium to long range engagements, and combining that with the one-tap potential, on maps like Haven, Bind, and Ascent, in almost every situation you're going to be better off sticking with the Vandal over the Phantom. With that being said, these buffs tilted the odds pretty heavily in the Vandal's favor, and throughout the days we have been and will be seeing the Vandal become more and more popular and become the new staple in the meta. That's because even though the Phantom has niche little benefits that tilted in its favor, these are things like a silencer, no tracers on the bullets, more ammo capacity in the magazine, and more ammo capacity in general, and the fact that the shots actually can't be heard if you're too far away from the Phantom, the Vandal actually has combat statistics that are better than the Phantom. And ultimately, whenever we're picking out our primary weapon, that's what you're going to be looking for, those combat stats that actually give you the ability to kill your opponent more efficiently and faster than the other weapon. So although the Phantom has the benefit in the niche scenarios, the 1% scenarios in the game that sometimes make a big difference, the Vandal just has more combat potential, and that's what you should be going for with the gun. And then next up, we have one of the biggest hot button nerfs that we've seen so far, and it seems like Sage has gotten absolutely gutted by the balancing team, and in a way, she absolutely did. Her slow orb was decreased in size by 30%. Her barrier orb now creates a wall that forms at 400 HP instead of 800, and after 3 seconds, it then becomes fortified to 800 HP if that section wasn't broken. And her heal, which most people are upset about the most, is now a maximum of 60 HP heal, and it takes 10 seconds to finish that amount if done to herself. Now while her heal is a very big part of her kit, and is a huge nerf, it's mostly a hit to her pistol rounds, because Sage being able to heal her teammates to full HP quickly against enemies with pistols is massive. Whereas on rifle rounds, it's nice, but far less effective because the enemy just has more firepower to take that 100 HP down. And with her slow orb being reduced by 30%, The main effect of her slow orb is still the same. It stops enemies from running through a choke point without being punished for it. So in most cases, the slow orb size nerf isn't really going to do as much as we think. And the barrier orb is probably the biggest nerf overall. You have 3 seconds from the time Sage clicks to deploy her wall before each section of the wall gains 400 HP. Meaning that it takes over 1 second to break a section of the wall firing with a rifle, giving you 2 seconds to pull your gun out and start shooting as soon as you see the Sage wall. Which isn't necessarily hard to do, but you do have to be in the right situation and scenario to actually be able to take advantage of this nerf. But it does make Sage's enemies predictable, and she can go for very aggressive peeks, relying on them to start shooting the wall immediately. But it is technically the biggest nerf to her kit overall, because that's where Sage shined the most, being able to stop a push in its tracks and allow her team to rotate, because they all have to stop and shoot this wall for a good bit of time. And in terms of meta impact, this will be the biggest change for the meta, because we've already started to see the no Sage meta come to Ascent, but no Sage comp should be the standard on Haven as well, and most likely Bind, but Sage is still going to be quite viable on Split. Now, Sage while taking care of elbow or CT on B site, Bind as an attacker is invaluable, and the ability to Sage wall for the plant is also a very dominant strategy, but with the counterplay that's added, she should become a lower tier pick in Bind, and we should start to see more varied metas come to balance around that map. With Sage falling out of the meta though, it does get much more exciting. It gives so much more room for the 5th man to work their way into the roster, because now there are 2 slots for that 5th man role, which are the agents that aren't necessarily vital to the way the team needs to play the map. Like originally every team needed a Sage, a Cypher, a smoke agent, and an entry fragger, and that left 1 spot open on the team for Raze, Breach, Viper, Sova, and Jet. Meaning that if your team picked 2 of these characters, you would then be missing out on some vital part of your team comp. With Sage not being a top priority anymore though, it's the perfect time for Sova to become the go-to 4th man on all maps except Split, and Breach taking that necessary role on Split, and that allows the other spot to be filled with any of the other characters, resulting in a huge boom in playtimes for these other characters. Speaking of Breach though, he just got a huge update recently, which made him way faster, way more aggressive, and gave him an extra flash. So his flash limit was increased from 2 to 3. And the speed of his flash was increased by about 17%, coming from 0.6 seconds down to 0.5 seconds before it pops. And Rolling Thunder, Breach's ultimate, got a 15% increase in speed, making the delay between each of the blasts of his ultimate 0.255 seconds instead of 0.3 seconds. Now these changes are actually incredible for the shift in the meta, because we've been seeing most maps be naturally defender-sided because of the overwhelming control ability of the agent so far, but with Breach getting faster, stronger, and with more utility, we should start seeing him be a contending force in the meta to shift maps from defender-sided to attacker-sided. Maps like Split, which are often unplayable on attack, become much easier to abuse because you have so much utility to use in such small corridors that you get a ton of value on Breach's abilities on attacker's side. And on maps like Haven, where flashes are king for taking sites and abusing the fact that there are 3-bomb sites, we should start seeing Breach being played a lot more to make the map swing pretty heavily in the attacker's favor. So, recently with the meta shifts, we're seeing the reliance on hardcore defensive agents be swapped out with more aggressive agents, and the strategy and playstyle of the game is going to completely change and get much faster as a result. Another one of the reasons defensive agents are falling out of meta and more aggressive agents are coming into the meta is because Killjoy was actually nerfed as well, so that's 2 of the biggest defensive agents we've had so far being nerfed. Now, while most people would argue that Cypher was still a better version of Killjoy, at least at higher ranks, the Killjoy nerfs came as a welcome change to everyone except for Killjoy mains. Because with her vulnerability bot and nanoswarm, she was able to do 120 damage per second with her grenade, almost guaranteeing a kill if she pulled it off correctly. It was the cheese factor that made Killjoy so great. But with the grenades being nerfed by 33%, going from 60 DPS to 40 damage per second, it now takes 4 full seconds to die from the nanoswarm without vulnerability, and 2 seconds to die if you were vulnerable from her bot. Meaning that Killjoy that doesn't time it perfectly can't stop you from suiciding to get the bomb to half, so your teammate can clutch the round with time left. And Killjoy's post plant only being able to barely stop the diffuser from getting half with perfect timing doesn't give her enough time to play with to play retake on bomb sites and play to stop the diffuse as an attacker. Although most people would say Killjoy is more fun to play, Cypher, at this point, is much stronger because what Killjoy is best at, she still doesn't do it well enough to be dominant. Whereas Cypher, what he does best at, he is the king of. He gets information and scares enemies into not pushing a site for the entirety of the half. Now, this isn't to say that Killjoy is bad, it's just that Cypher is so dominant at the role he does, and we should see, after Killjoy starts to fall out of the meta because she's no longer new and exciting, Cypher should creep back into the dominant spot as the go-to sentinel on pretty much all maps. The other option that we can start to see is double sentinel compositions with Cypher and Killjoy, which can be very effective and does cause an insane amount of issues for enemies whenever you're on defender side, but retaking a bomb site becomes very difficult if you can't actually manage to hold it in the first place. And then for attacker side, while you can lock down flanks and stack for a rush, it becomes a little bit too difficult to make plays and take sites. So while this probably will be a viable comp that a lot of people will try out and limit test, it probably won't be the go-to for most teams because it's a little bit too difficult to pull off. And finally, we have Viper. I feel like I have to talk about her because so many people want to play her and it seems like they want her to be meta. And honestly, I'm happy to see Viper getting so much love from the devs recently because she's one of the most unique and fun agents to play if you can do it well. But unfortunately, most of her changes aren't doing enough to make her competitive with some of the other agents in the game. The changes she's been getting are very niche, quality of life, or playability changes that make her easy to play around, which is one of the most difficult things to do as a person on a teammate with a Viper. This is something like where the most recent change we've seen to Viper is where her DK no longer affects allies. And this is a bigger change than most people realize because as a Viper main, there are plenty of times where you don't want to ult because you have 4 or 5 people still alive on your team, and you don't want to force them to have to play inside of your ultimate or force them to play bad angles around your ultimate because it blocks so much. With the decay change though, it does allow you to ult every time you get the bomb down without fear of messing up your team so you can clutch out more of those rounds. And these continual quality of life and playability changes, Viper could be making a comeback into the meta. While she probably still needs a couple more changes to make her meta, she can be ran as a second sentinel that still functions pretty well on attacker side. And that's often a very effective strategy on maps like Split or Bind. So Viper could become picked as the middle ground and balance out the team between a defender-sided and an attacker-sided team. And then with Sage falling out of the meta and the option for other characters to take hold, Viper will start being picked more often, but still far from a meta pick. As people continue to learn her, and Riot continues to tweak her, she should eventually make her way into a contending pick, at least we hope so. But ultimately, the meta will continue to change. And honestly, I think the meta is changing heavily for the better. The game is getting faster, and it becomes more entertaining, and more fun to play because everyone on your team isn't pigeonholed into playing the hardcore meta champions, and more options is just more enjoyable. And remember, if you want to improve, win more gunfights, and get the rank you've always wanted, then check out SkillCapped.com. The link is in the description below. But let us know in the comments below what you think about how the meta is changing, and let us know what you want to see next. And make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all of the premium comprehensive content that we're putting out so you can stay up to date and ahead of the pack. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching and spending this little bit of your day with us, and I'm Notorious Dub, signing off.